Welcome to Kansas City Business Cast. This is your host, Michael Reisinger. I've got an awesome dude on the show. I know I say everybody's awesome, but honestly, I interview the people that I see doing good work out there in Kansas City and on the interwebs, if you will. And I've been following Baer Halvorson for a while. We connected about a year ago on LinkedIn. Baer, welcome to the show, man. Force to be reckoned with. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much, man. I was excited when you reached out because I know you've been working on your podcast for a year. And like you said, we connected like a year ago. I was like, oh, a Kansas City-based podcast? That's awesome, you know? And your content's been great. And I really think that, like, I tell people, I'm like, look, it's not just for people in Kansas City. Like, people are giving leadership advice and how they've, addressed challenges and stuff like that. And so you got something special here, man. So to be a part of it's quite an honor. But I'm glad to be here.
I appreciate it, man. So glad to have you here. You and I, as we started talking about this, in the background that you provided to me, and then what I've noticed on LinkedIn, I think, as far as physical security goes, that is the space that you're in, right? And maybe you could give a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and the elements of business and podcasting that you're in, and then we'll use that to set the stage and go forward.
Yeah, definitely. So about 12 years ago, I started in locksmithing with an Olathe-based locksmith, Chaffee Lock Pro, and I ran with him for 2 or 3 years, and then I went out on my own for a couple years in my own van, and that's where I really started to pick up electronic security, so like access control where you badge your card to get into the building and the electric lock unlocks, or video surveillance and video cameras, and also something in the industry, we say intrusion detection, but that means like alarm, like your ADT alarm on your house or at your company. And so I really started to explore those things when I was on my own, running my own van. And that took a couple years. I was pretty naive to it. I didn't really have entrepreneurs in my family or around me, so it was kind of like just out there winging it. And after a couple years, it was doing all right, but it was a lot of residential and small to medium business, and I didn't understand what to do when it came to bigger jobs and working on big job sites or in commercial spaces. And so I actually set it down and got hired by a contractor out of North Kansas City. And I started running with them, and I learned a ton just from pulling wire to setting up AV systems, nurse call systems in hospitals and hospice places. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I got picked up by a national service provider, and I was like their Kansas City-based technician. And so I worked for places like Verizon and Deloitte and just worked on their access control and physical security. Then after that, the pandemic kind of hit. We went through some crazy years, and Kansas City's client base for that security company was pretty office based. So it all pretty much shut down. And then they were like, well, we have a lot of business up in Omaha, so I was driving to Omaha 3 days a week, waking up at like 4 in the morning and getting home at like 8. And that lasted for like 2.5 months before I was like, I cannot do this the rest of my life, So, so then
lots of corn on the way up to Omaha.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess if you're a fan of looking at cornfields, then great, but most of us aren't.
But no, so then I actually made the jump from more of like the technician in the field, turning the screwdrivers, installing the parts, to the design side of it. So I started designing it on prints, working with, commercial companies. We were doing, and that was national too. I was designing security systems for a big dairy corporation up in the Northwest. And so did a lot of that. And then I had a weird opportunity. So I started building my Instagram fan base, because I just was on there. I was posting a lot of the work I was doing over the, 6 to 8 years that I was a technician. And that kind of grew on Instagram. So there's this niche of security and low voltage technicians on Instagram that I've met some of my best friends today, actually, that are still national. Like one's in Arizona, one's in Rhode Island. And so it's like that just grew on Instagram. So as I was posting that stuff, a guy reached out to me and he's like, "Hey man, I've been following you for a while and I do high-end residential AV up near Glacier National Park
That's
in
audio
Montana."
video, right?
Yeah, audio video. Yep. So
Or audio
he was
visual.
putting like sound systems in theaters, in homes. You know, they were doing like Control 4 smart homes where you could like get the lights would come on at certain times and it was all tied in. And he's like, "You know, I want to do alarm. A lot of the clients that I get ask if I can put alarm in. And so would you be willing to come up here with your family and like we run business side by side and we put alarm in with this high-end AV stuff?" And we were actually scheduled for a trip where we were going through Utah and up towards, Wyoming and stuff. And he was like, "Bro, just drive up here for a day. I'll pay your hotel. We can meet." And it was from there, it was kind of like, okay, let's do this. So I moved the family from Kansas City to Kalispell or Whitefish, Montana. And we lived up there for a year and a half, 2 years, and then we came back. It didn't work out like planned, and it's pretty expensive up there. After the pandemic, Californians like took over the place. So after that, I was like, well, we got to get back home because we're not going to be able to live up here much longer. And so then I came home, and I still worked nationally for a datacom and telecom provider that's in the IT space for a couple years, and that's where I really got a glimpse into the cybersecurity side of it. So physical security and cybersecurity for a long time have been getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And now you get physical security professionals who are maybe white collar or at the high end of physical security, and they know cybersecurity as well, just because it's that close. Because you can't really secure a site anymore, or even your home. If you think about it, like you can put alarm on your home and change your locks, but then you still want someone not creeping around on your internet watching all your files get saved and your photos and all that stuff. So
Right.
It's the same in commercial space as well. And so after that, I got the opportunity that I'm actually kind of brand new at Kenton Brothers Security Systems in Kansas City that's been around for 127 years. They started as a locksmith in like 1897, and it is ballin'. They got an excellent culture, and they just do a lot of physical security in kind of the Midwest space. So we got an office out in Columbia, Missouri, and the whole nine. And that's kind of where I'm at now. But with all that, there was a period when I was driving to Omaha that I was like, you know what? I need to use this time because Drake can only get you so far before you're like, I'm wasting my time. And so I start looking for podcasts and any sort of like audiobooks or any sort of information that I can listen to while I'm driving. And in the physical security space, there was nothing. You could find a cybersecurity podcast. They were a dime a dozen. But anything I had to do with, access control or video surveillance or anything like that, I couldn't find anything. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast, and it's just going to be news and highlights. It'll be like, 25, 30 minutes. And it'll cause me to have to read publications because there's some magazines out there and stuff that put out that news. And so I'll be sharper in the industry, and I'll just relay it over a podcast. And hopefully the next dip that has to drive to Omaha 3 times a week, he's got at least something to listen to.
Dude.
And that's how it started, yeah.
Your podcast is so good, man. Your personality, that. Like the jokes, just how and I guess we'll talk about your origin and story more as well, because I'm very interested in what got you started in security and what keeps you going and what you're excited about. We will definitely talk about that, but just to talk about your podcast a bit, just to give people kind of a sneak peek. I mean, I was listening on the way to the gym this morning, and you said something about a piece of technology. It was something 9,000, and you said it's like, again, you're so quick that it's like I know what you said, but I can't repeat it, right?
Yeah.
And you said something like that might sound like a 2-year-old with a cardboard box using it to heal their stuffed animal.
Yeah.
It might sound like something janky, but the color and the phrasing that you use, You talked too about, recently, changing firms that you were working for, and you said, hey, haven't had much time for the podcast. That's something that resonates with me too, man, because I went to full-time employment back in March, and I know a lot of things slowed down with the podcast. People were asking me, hey, man, when's another episode coming out? And it's like, we do this like in our spare time. And with you
Yes,
having a
yes.
family and kids, it's like, we try to, if we're smart, responsible husbands and fathers, right? All of us, everyone listening, we do this stuff so that it doesn't eat into family time, so it doesn't eat
Mm-hmm.
into, if we're full-time employed, like we're not working on our businesses and our podcasts while we're doing our job, right? So time has to fit in somewhere. But I heard you talking about, you write content, you prepare. Obviously, I love how you said, I read the news, so then that will help me relay that information out. And with it being called Security Today, I just feel like that's just perfect, because like today, like this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
your dose of security. Let me ask you this: why security? So you got started in locksmithing, like, maybe you could give me your why. What was your why, and what's your why now, if it's any different or if it's evolved?
Okay, so I had my father retired from the Lenexa Police Department. So security was kind of just around in my life from the law enforcement perspective. And I didn't think much of that. When I went to college, I kind of hopped around a little bit with what I thought that I wanted to do. And there was a period that I was going to Johnson County Community College's law enforcement program and studying criminology and stuff like that, which is still an interest even today. But that kind of faded out, and I went a different path. And then I was about to get married, and so I was about to get married, and I was working for a guy who sold Hot Wheels on eBay. Now that sounds sketch, but this dude had like 250,000 Hot Wheels in a warehouse, and he was pushing like 35, 40K a month, where we were just
Yeah, bro.
shipping Hot Wheels through an eBay store. And so it was awesome. And he actually was more of a mentor in my life. He was, not like an older guy, but he was older than me. He had, a family and a couple kids, and I was just getting married. And so he passed down a lot of wisdom in that time. But I thought to myself, this is probably not recession proof, right? Like, I need a career, not just shipping Hot Wheels out of an old warehouse. And so I was like, well, what can I do? And I don't know. I'm not like, I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not like super religious. But it was just like out of nowhere, I was walking in this Target parking lot, and I was like, what about a locksmith? And I didn't really even know what locksmithing was. And so I kind of like looked into it. I found a mail-in course from a reputable locksmith education organization called Foley Bellsaw. They'll mail you this small key machine and these book chapters, and they'll teach you locksmithing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try that. And so I did that. And then I had a friend who goes, hey, my friend from high school's dad is a locksmith. Do you want me to reach out? And I was like, yes, please. And that's kind of how I got started. And the more people that I talk to in physical security, a lot of them are like, I just fell into it. Like I wasn't looking for it. It just kind of came through all these different avenues. And that's pretty common in the industry. But once I got into it, there were definitely a couple times in the last 12 years, and I'm sure everybody has this, where you're like, maybe I should do something else. Like this isn't really working out, or I'm at a kind of a slow point that I don't feel like I'm growing, or this isn't providing a lot of opportunities. And there were a couple times of that, but it just somehow kept me in it. And now I feel that I've grown the passion over the years that physical security is actually something that I hold on the playing field of doctors and emergency responders and police officers, because there's a theory in criminology called the bang, the event, right? That bang or that event is the security event that happens that, something goes wrong. And a lot of times right of bang, if you're looking at like a timeline, on the right side of that event is where you get your doctors and your police officers and first responders coming in to mitigate the things that have happened and to, try to get things back to normal. But on the other side of that, security professionals are trying to just stay away from that moment. And so we're putting mitigations in place that keep us from that moment. If it happens, then they're in place to either slow down that moment or to steer it away from its objective. And so over the years, I've grown a lot of pride and a lot of passion for the security industry. And then just naturally growing up, I was a person in an environment that now I want to give. I want the industry to do well. And so with the podcast, it has an educational arm that I put education videos through. And
What's that called?
That's called, blackpicketfenceonline.com.
Sweet. Love it.
So, and the idea there is that everybody's shooting for that goal of, the house with the white picket fence and 2.5 kids or whatever. Well, the black picket fence is the security behind that white picket fence that keeps that dream alive, Yeah. So, so through all of that, I've just grown, I'm intertwined in it. You know what I'm saying? Like the roots of security are just kind of now my identity a little bit, which I'm okay with. But yeah, that's kind of how it happened. It was out of nowhere, really.
I love it, man. And, I think too, like as the world gets more insane and, in many ways, like I don't really cover that kind of stuff here on this podcast. Like I don't go there. At some point, I'll be going on a couple of other local podcasts where I've talked with the hosts about maybe going down that path about what made me and what I take seriously. But security is so important. And even before I had kids, when my wife and I, we were going through infertility, we were trying to adopt. I didn't know if God was going to give us kids or not, right? But I knew that if he did, there's going to be a significant portion of time where they are not with me. And I want to make sure that they are safe wherever they go. I want to make sure our home is safe. Like I see the value in security, honestly. And when you said like we're right there with, doctors, law enforcement, first responders, all of that. If you're talking about security, I'd love to hear your perspective on home security as well, and things that maybe some of our listeners can do if they start to have some mind-opening moments where they're going, well, gosh, I've been listening to SimpliSafe commercials for 3 years and I still haven't done it or whatever, right? Like, or if there's been break-ins lately and they're like the Ring app is full of all these horror stories of these things, right?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit, but like, if we talk about security is layers, right? Like, I had the 115-pound German Shepherd because that was my early warning system, right?
Right.
And like there are layers, and there's if you talk about with schools like K through 12 right now, there's communication plans, and like unfortunately we know there's active shooter situations, and so that's security has been a huge topic. But again, like find so many folks like are often late to this topic, or especially in like privileged neighborhoods. That's why part of your security is your connection with other business owners in your business park and in your neighborhood. It's with your neighbors. It's like, hey, I'm going to be out of town for like, a week. Let me know if you see something weird around my house or whatever it is. Or can you bring my trash cans up so it doesn't look like I've been gone for 2 weeks? There's like all these levels and nuggets of security. It is literally part of daily life. Like it is part of daily life. Like we all get up. We all go out to work wanting to be healthy and accomplish the goal and all that kind of stuff. But the world has, going back to my original point, like bad things happen to good people, right? There's crazy stuff out there, right? And so security, it's like, anyway, Baer, I'm obviously so excited.
I love it, dude.
I'm so excited about this. And the other thing too, that I think maybe this is a topic as well that we could talk about, but like, sometimes people think that security is paranoia, and it's like, well, what they don't understand is that if you integrate it into your life, like for us, very simple example, I still don't understand why people in the Midwest don't lock their car doors. Me being from California, I was a California escapee 9 years ago when you were talking about all the people moving up to California and Montana. It's like, I was one of the guys who moved to Kansas City. But like very, very simple modus operandi. Every time I get out of my car, beep. Every time I leave the house now, we're all conditioned. Hit away mode, right? Set the timer. Like, it's a part of life. Like, it doesn't have to be paranoia. There's simple steps that we can take. Because I just pursued like 7 tangents, which one do you want to kind of talk about?
Well, obviously, thank you for opening it up, because there are definitely a ton of topics in what you just said. I really do like the idea that you can There's multiple ways to secure your business. Securing your business, let me say this first. When you secure your business, is what it is doing is what I call it keeping Christmases. That's what I've used in my life, because a lot of times we think, okay, I don't need security because it's, 1 in a million chance that some crazy guy is going to come in here and shoot everybody. And it's like, yeah, but that isn't the only risk or threat that you have that could also ruin those people's lives. Because if you have a cybersecurity attack and it brings down your operations, and you have to do a lot of mitigation and do a lot of cleanup and figure out exactly what data was stolen and what data was put out there and what liability that your company is now under, because you held what? You held emails, you held phone numbers, you held addresses. Like, if those things were swiped from you and now they're out there on the internet, like, there's going to be some litigation and some liability that you now need to get into. And there are consultants that can come in and help you build a contingency plan that when those things do happen, these are the steps that we take. But that is all downtime. So if your business is producing anything, if it's retail, it is going to have to shut down. If it's producing anything, those producing lines that are putting out product are going to have to shut down for a minute. And will it have to shut down long enough that now you can't pay a person? And if you can't pay a person, in the world that we're living in today, a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. If I now have to go 4 weeks on something that I was hoping would get me a week and a half, I'm going to be in a horrible way. And I'm not going to be able to put food in the pantry for the kids or pay for the soccer thing that I got them in because I want them to live a good life, And so there are a lot of things that physical and cybersecurity can come into your business, and it can keep those Christmases so that people live and have a quality of life that is, what we want them to have, being employees of our company. And so it's really important to do that. And one way that you mentioned, I love it. It's like relational security. So knowing the businesses around you and building that community. Or for instance, at Kenton Brothers, we're based off of Truman in Kansas City, and our CEO is on the board for the Truman Road project that is looking to build up Truman Road to bring back life into that area. And those sorts of things are only beneficial to literally her employees, right? To me and the guy that I work with, because if Truman Road is built back up and there's security measures put in place and goodness is brought back into it, then that is securing on a very, very far outside layer my job, which is now putting food on my kid's table, So it's not just about the crazy stories we hear in the news that, this person went wild and ran their van down Power and Light District and took out all these people. Like, there's also just everyday things that cause security incidents that can now have a huge impact on you and the people that, you're employing. And so I think that's a really good security measure. There's also, one thing that I will say about security when it comes to home and business is that your best defense actually is light. And there's a New York study that came out in, I think, the early 2000s, and then they revisited it in the teens and redid it and saw that it worked, that light is a security measure that brings down crime 30%. Now, 30% might not sound like a lot to somebody who's running off of 100% scales out in the real world, but in crime statistics, you move at like 1 to 2%, right? Like, I get an alarm system on my business, that drops 2% of the crime that could happen to me because they saw the sticker on the window. But if I put a light inside or outside of my property, I'm dropping it by 30%. You're moving mountains at that point. So like you said, bring in the trash cans, leave a light on. Or if you have a business, just make sure at night it's well lit in front of your shop. Like, some people might think naturally like, oh, but that's going to attract people, Like, if it's the only lit business on the street. If it's the only lit business on the street, the guy that wants to get into a business to take the money or trash it or whatever is going to go to the one that's dark,
That's
So
right.
Light is a huge friend of yours when you're putting security in your home or your business. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've heard one of my favorite podcasters, John Lovell from Warrior Poet Society, talks about that too. And he talks about, like, make sure your grass is cut. Make sure that, you pressure wash your entryway. Like just all these little things to show, like,
Right.
somebody who cares lives here.
Yeah.
Right.
So What you're talking about there is actually a theory in physical security theory called crime prevention through environmental design, CPTED. And so in the industry, we call it CPTED. And there are whole studies, theories, books, people, consultants, businesses that only focus on CPTED. And it's the idea that you're using the environment to prevent crime. So one of those ways is keeping your grass cut, keeping it power washed. You know, if your house is dirty, keeping it clean on the outside, making, repainting when you need to, re-roofing when you need to, those sorts of things to make it look upkept. And that is based off a 1960s study. I forget the two guys who did it, but they were old sheriffs, and they were like doing criminology studies called the broken windows theory. And
That's what I've been thinking about the last 3 minutes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so that's exactly it. They took a car out to a nice area in California and kind of a more, poorer area in New York, and they broke one window, and then they saw what would happen to the car over time. And even though it happened quicker in a more impoverished area in New York, where it was like the car was stripped, the Cadillac converter ripped out, the alternator took, and by like the end of I think 3 or 4 days, it was just this junk car that had been, graffitied and tagged and smashed to death because it had a broken window, right? But even in the nice area in California, the same thing happened just over a little bit longer duration. And so it was showing that if you have a business and something's broke on the outside of your business, or it's looking like a little run down, it's actually attracting the human nature within us to be like, oh, no one cares about this. I can do this more to it. Or I can, honestly, okay, look. So from a criminological perspective, it is true that males from 18 to 24 or 26 are the most likely aggressive offenders in crime. And that's just biological. And I can agree with that, because between 18 and 24, didn't you just want to smash things? Like you
In
wanted
many
to
ways,
throw the
still,
rock.
still
Yeah.
do.
Yes,
I'm just
it's still
a
there for
disciplined
sure.
savage. Hone it into
Yeah.
all kinds of good things. But yes, I
Yeah.
still, 100% agreed. Sorry,
Exactly.
go on.
So yeah, so if your business is, if it's got a cracked window, or you're maybe like, sometimes you see the aluminum storefront doors that have a big window in them with like the little push bar. Sometimes those windows get hurt, and then you put like plywood up, right? Until you get the window fixed. But it's important that you keep that time to a minimum, because something is like that can show blight right at the first notion of it, and that can be bad for your business. And I know that it's a little dicey to talk about in 2024, because we have social justice issues that we are trying to fix and things that need to be brought to light. But when it comes to the numbers of crime statistics, it is just, it's like a flip of the coin. You have two sides of it, right? That's just a fact. There's no third side. So take care of your business, take care of your home, if those things, and especially face front, like if it's facing the street, it's more important to your risk mitigation process, whether it's your home or your business, to fix, than if it's on the back, or if it's on the roof, or on the top, or whatever. That's just the way it is.
Absolutely. It's funny how often I might have told people this on the show before, but I was a criminal justice major. I got my degree.
Awesome.
It's been useless up to this point, but I learned so much about psychology, about
Yeah.
the justice system, the injustice system. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah.
a lot. There's a lot in there. But I have ever since I learned about broken window theory, I have found a way to apply that to my character. I figured out ways to apply that to leadership in the workplace, to having little jobs and demonstrating that I can, do well in those to earn bigger jobs. But the broken window theory, you know, if we take that to a sort of, on another level, right? And I'm trying to make a connection here, because I do this all the time. And now, so I'm explaining it to you and our audience about how I apply that to, getting off of your discipline or whatever. And I'm going to let a broken window and sometimes, a Snicker bar or a trip to McDonald's before work every day, slippage of upkeep or slippage of discipline, whatever, kind of losing my point there. But
No,
it, it
yeah.
yeah,
It can apply to your character too.
Help,
Like
yeah,
that's
help me process that, dude. Like, you know
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Like, how have you seen the things that you've learned in your criminology program, and how that's applied to, like, security and just real life and life as a professional, as a podcaster, father? Like, how has that worked out for you? We'll
Yeah,
explore
no,
that.
I really liked where you were going with that. That idea that it almost like so broken window theory and the idea that, if you have something broke, human behavior, human biological nature will want to continue to break that thing. That being human means that it's not just going to be in crime, it's going to
Yep.
be
There we
in
go. Thank you.
everything that we do,
Saving me here, bro.
No, no, you're good. That was it's an excellent thought. And so we need to make sure that if there are those things that are face front in our life, like our character, our morals, our ethics, our discipline, our leadership, the things that are like right there when you're dealing with your kid, your spouse, your partner, your the person that you're working alongside, or your boss, or the person you're over. Like all of those things are face front. So if we let something that's broken in that, like for instance in our leadership, if we're becoming somebody who tells everybody to do everything but doesn't get down there and do it ourselves, or doesn't praise somebody when they do something well but we are quick to critique them when it's not, then those are broken windows that are going to lead to a leadership that will eventually kind of end up like that car in that study that's just completely torn apart. And at the end of it, if you didn't work on yourself, you're going to just be kind of a hunk of junk that didn't really contribute to much? So
Absolutely.
I like that thought. I like that thought.
Well, on that path too, have you always been this awesome, man? Because I know, like, in our previous conversation you talked about how you want to lead your family with kindness, honesty, I think it was enjoyment and
Mhm.
positive growth. How did Bear get to be who Bear is today? You talked about
Yeah.
being a kid too, 18 to 24. Like, didn't you, I just wanted to break things,
Yeah.
Q
Yeah.
Limp Biscuit break stuff. What is your own personal and professional development been like?
Yeah. I think that, I'll tell you, it was levels. So I talked about that guy that I used to,
Mm,
ship Hot Wheels for.
yeah.
And when I got married, he was like, "Bro, you don't even know what's coming. It's going to be the next level, dude." And then I was with him long enough that a couple years later I had a kid coming, and he was still in my life pretty actively, and he's like, "Bro, you don't even know, your whole life is about to just fucking explode." And I was, because he said that when I was getting married, I was like, "Oh, I believe him," because he was right. Like it
Mm,
just changes everything. And so it was kind of when that started to happen, used a lot in my past to kind of let it be the thing that tells me what not to do. And I feel like most of my life I've been out here just trying to do the thing that wasn't what I liked about that, and what I did like about my past I try to keep. And I found that, like you said, lead my family in kindness and enjoyment. I found that there were a lot of nights, and I'm really close to my wife, and I mean, we've been best friends for a really long time, alongside our marriage of being partners and roommates and all that other stuff. So there were a lot of nights that we sat out on the porch, like smoking a cigar, like, drinking, and just thinking like what do we want to make of our life? And a lot of that dreaming, a lot of that vision, I think people lose that, man. I think that they get into this rhythm of life and they're just doing the thing, and I want to go boating this weekend, or I want to do that, or I want to do that. And it's like, what do you want to do 3 years from now, though? What do you want to do 10 years from now? Because I don't want to be living in a 3-bed apartment in 10 years, right? So what am I going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen? Because I want my kid to have land or a big house or something like that, whatever your goal is, right? And so all that dreaming that we did in the first 4 or 5 years of marriage, it put a lot of purpose and intent behind everything that I'm doing. And I found that out of all of that, the one strand that stayed true was kindness. That kindness, and I think people will confuse kindness with being nice. And so you'll hear parents all the time, no, be nice, be nice, be nice. And it's like, okay, you can be nice to somebody and still hate their guts, right? But you can't be kind to them and hope that they also die. Like, those two things don't exist. So when you're kind towards people, it's like coming at them as they are human. They are going to have experiences that I don't even know about. A lot of times when I get on calls with people that are maybe like an important business call, or it's an introductory call or something like that, I often try to tell myself, I'm like, okay, their dog just died. Remember that, because I want to go into the conversation thinking, if this goes south, or if they get like triggered about some little saying that I said, it's probably not me, And so that, I feel like, is kindness. Like, you're approaching with an open hand. Now, the nice thing is, I say nice, the good thing is that kindness kind of follows truth. So I don't have to keep kindness for people. If they do me wrong, or if they decide that I'm a threat, or if their interest is not my family or not the most important things to me, then I can revoke my kindness, and I don't have to hate them. I don't have to like be unkind to them to hold my kindness away from them. They can just be a person. This is you, this, that, other. And so it came with a lot of dreaming. And maybe I'm not making a ton of sense there, but it came with like, a lot of dreaming, a lot of perspective of where do I want to be? And keeping that at the forefront, I think that you make decisions differently from your day to day, which hopefully ends up meaning that you're becoming a better and better person.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm so with you on the niceness versus kind stuff. I make people, people that know me, or when I'm first meeting people, I think they find out very, very quickly I'm not necessarily a nice guy. And that's the last thing that I want to be called. I do not want to be called a nice guy. But yeah. I am kind to people, to everybody from the person at the front desk to the CEO to, the janitor who cleans the restroom every day. Like, I get to know them and, at least know their name. And, I care about that kind of stuff. And I also, it's funny, Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse really had an influence on me when he said, be nice until it's time to not be nice.
Yeah. Exactly.
But seriously, kindness is one of those things that, like, I think it often, it gets translated to being nice and being meek. And especially as men, it's like, oh, we don't want to be considered kind, or that's not a masculine trait. Yeah. But it's like actually, like, to the secure male individual, like, kindness is huge. It's an exercise in, just being strong. Actually, there's a lot of strength that comes in kindness. Like when you talked about like how, you can almost partition or segment or compartmentalize kindness, niceness, right? And then, if we take it a little bit further and we talk about grace, right? Like somebody says something they didn't mean to say, and it's like, hey, you know what? I've seen me do it. I've seen
his
me
dog
screw
died,
up.
Yeah,
Man, right? Go back to his dog died. God, I love it. I love it, man, so much. I guess for me, like when I look at your podcast, and because I'm a podcaster, like I know that you're doing all of the small, boring ass, mundane stuff. Yeah. You're doing that, and you're doing it really well. Like, tell us a little bit about building security today, what you've learned. It's not often that I get a podcaster. We had one in season 2, Bump Jonas, and in hindsight, I feel like I should have asked him a little bit more about that. But like the inner workings of your podcast, like what does that involve? I'm not necessarily asking every single detail, but if you wanted to provide that, that's fine. But like, what are some lessons that you've learned in taking, your passion and your career and then putting it out in a format that people can like consume worldwide? Isn't that a trip to like think about that when you think about your podcast? Like, right. I don't know if you've ever looked in this. Do you use Spotify as your hosting platform?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you can see the country and like gender and age range and all this other stuff. And it's like, it's such a trip, dude. But like, can you tell us about that? Like your learnings, things that you thought would work and didn't, things that have really worked, what's working right now, and like, just going into the podcast a bit.
Yeah, totally. And that is a trip, man. You're like, oh, someone in Germany is listening. Like, how?
Why?
But so when I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm going to have a podcast. I knew nothing, man. That was not. And
what year was that when you did?
It would have been like 2019, 2018,
Okay.
2019, like right
Pretty
around
hard
that time.
times. Pretty hard times for starting a podcast because we did not have all of the stuff that we do now.
Yeah,
That's
no,
that's
right.
what, like 7, 8 years ago. Okay, so
Jeez, yeah,
28. I know, bro.
yeah,
It's humbling. 2018-ish. You said you started it, or you were thinking
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
All right, go
yeah.
ahead.
I was thinking about it, and I think that it was like, I think it was 2019 that like it was kind of right before the pandemic, and I was like, okay, I want to start this podcast. Like and then I started having to drive to Omaha because everything shut down, but being in security, we were called essential workers, and so we got to work. So I was driving going, okay, now is kind of the time. Like I wish I had content, but I don't. And so I didn't know, I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, I had done some music when I was young. And so I was like, so I have a microphone. I had a couple of buddies who were in music. And so I started asking questions like, hey, what do you record on, or like, what do you record into? And I found, back before it was Spotify, was Anchor FM. I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember that.
Yes, sir.
And so I found Anchor FM and just kind of started. And I actually now I remember. I started the podcast for Security Today in 2020 when the pandemic hit. In 2018, I had another podcast with a friend of mine called Fresh Respect. And I don't know if it's still out there, but it was like we would take old things and we would give it fresh respect. And so we would just like talk about these old things that used to happen.
What? Oh, what is it? Was it like events or like pop culture? Like
Yeah,
what?
we
What
did
old things?
everything. So like we had like old generals, or we had like this old tool that they used to use in farming. And you're just like, this is what it looked like. This is how they used it. This is how it changed agriculture. And it's like, some things
My
just need fresh
gosh,
respect,
bro.
Yeah. So I had kind of like a little bit of seeing, doing it with him. And so, but it's all been a learning curve. It's like, and you continually learn. And I think that we get caught up in this culture that's like, we saw Facebook, happen overnight. And we saw these people who they have one TikTok, and all of a sudden they're on every YouTube podcast. They're on every screen that I'm looking at. And so you think that they just blew up. And the truth about it is like they got all those views, and a year and a half goes by and they're back to just normal people most of the time, right? Or it's a company that takes off like that, and that's the 0.1% that come out of starting businesses. And so you just have to realize it is a little bit of a slog. Like it just takes time. And the nice thing is that as the podcast went on, as it grew, it got sweeter. Like I learned more about people. It was always, and it was the best. I went to a convention and I was walking down and I wore a shirt that had my logo, my Security Today podcast logo on it. And this dude that I don't even know, he was just a vendor. He's like, hey man, I listen to your podcast. I was like, what?
I call that
like,
getting rock-ignized,
yeah.
because it's like a rock star type feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
That dude, I got the chills because that's just amazing, dude.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that was awesome. So it grows over, if you put into it, if you put the effort into it, it will pan out. But when it came to podcasting, it was just learning more and more. So, you learned like, oh, now I looked into streamers a little bit, like, the people who stream all the time, they use OBS. And so I played around in OBS a little bit for a couple of my episodes. And then, I was like, oh, I need some backlighting, or, I sound better when I use this microphone. And anybody that I would usually work with or have on the podcast that also podcasted, or they had their own mic, I would be like, what are you using? So
Well, let me ask you, because I gotta
curiosity.
ask, because that microphone looks huge on the screen.
Okay. Yeah. So
Is that your pop filter, bro? How big?
yes. So
That
this
is
called
incredible. And that's a
it's called
Shure
a-
SMB, right?
this is a Shure SMB. This is called a
That's my-
Chaotica
Woo!
pop filter. And like
Okay.
rap artists will use this in a hotel room because it literally like blocks out everything. You don't need a sound booth.
I love it, man.
So,
Thank you
slides
for
on there.
indulging.
Just like that.
Incredible. So you were looking into mics and equipment. By the way, that
Yeah.
mic is one that I want to expand to. I want to get one of those. But no,
Yeah.
go ahead. So you're looking into equipment. You're looking into mics. You tried OSB.
Yeah.
Other learnings, other things you tried. Yeah.
And then you quickly learn that, like, okay, I've got this setup that will create the content, but like, how do I get the content out there? Like, learning how to do content on LinkedIn is a whole masterclass in and of itself, next to YouTube, next to Instagram. And then you're like, oh, so I use another site called Metricool. It's like Merticool, and Metricool will let me schedule on all my platforms posts. So I can create a post, put a little reel up, and then I can click YouTube short, I can click Instagram, I can click LinkedIn, and it'll post it all to that. And if it wasn't for that, bro, I wouldn't have half the content I do, because I can do that for an hour and a half on a Tuesday night after the kids go down. You know what I'm saying? And then
Dude,
it'll pump out
like you
2.5
wouldn't
weeks
believe.
of
Well,
content.
like I do understand, like you would believe, because I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
by going to this, I've shaved off about, no joke, like 6 to 8 hours.
Yes.
Because we also had the scheduling, we had to meet in person, and I
Right.
want to get back to that, but time is insane, the savings.
Yeah.
But no, I wrote that down because I'm going to look into that. That's
Yeah, it's
really
solid,
good.
dude. Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, maybe $22 a month or something.
Okay, and for the time, that is
for the time, bro.
1,000 freaking percent worth it.
Yes,
Yeah.
100. And it gives you crazy analytics. So, but yeah, so you just pick up those things as you're learning, and I think that what drives it the most is curiosity. And this is going to be something that, kind of like we were talking about broken window, it's like, this is something that could apply to everything in your life. The reason that I have jumped in my career over 12 years from, $12 an hour to, upwards of 6 figures. It's like, I jumped all that because of curiosity. It was because of, like, first of all, what else is out there? Who's willing to pay me more for my time? Second of all, what do I need to learn to get paid more for my time? Like, is it going to be this specific thing in my industry? Is it going to be this platform? Is it going to be this leadership model? Is it going to be this device that I need to learn about? Then at night, I'm sitting there, my wife and I are watching Netflix, like New Girl or something, and I'm flipping through a spec sheet on my phone trying to figure out, how would you wire this if I was putting it in? And that seems like, oh, okay. But it was like that 10 minutes the next day, not necessarily always the next day, but at some point, someone's like, yeah, we got to put this in. And I'm like, I know how to do that. And so, and not being afraid to use Google and YouTube. Goodness gracious, bro. Like, if someone ever asks you at your job or in your business, or a customer asks your business for something that is relative to what you have, and they're like, can you do this? Just say yes. Like, just say yes. Because between Google and YouTube, and you can contact me and I'll help you out and show you how I Google search or whatever, you can figure out how to do it. And there's a lot of grace in customers too that I think people don't understand if you own your mistakes. This is something else. Now I'm ranting, but this is something else where
Keep it up, bro.
I talk about on the podcast a lot. And I talk about with a good friend of mine out of Arizona. His name's Frankie Salyer. He owns Cicada Systems. He puts low voltage in like cannabis grow houses and all sorts of access control in office parks and stuff like that. And we talk a lot about, if you own it, like if you drill through a hole through the wall, you know what I'm saying? And there's just this ugly hole and a drill bit sticking out of it. And you're like, shit, like this is going to cost me money. You figure out the solution first. You go, okay, I'm going to have to pull this out. I'm going to have to go to Home Depot, get spackle, come out twice, put it in, and then ask the customer for their paint and paint it for them and make it look better. So I figure out the solution. The next thing I do is I just call the customer and I own it. Hey, look, man, I put a drill bit through your wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some spackle for that. I can fix this, and I'm going to put this in, and I'm sorry that happened. It's just going to add a little time to it, but not at your cost. I can't tell you how many customers go, okay, thanks for telling me.
That's right.
But if you don't say anything and they show up the next morning, and even if you intended on fixing it and you didn't tell them, they're like, what the fuck, man? Why is there a hole in my wall?
Yep.
And then they're like, this guy's a hack. And so if you own it, bro, you can get away with a lot. You know what I'm saying? If you have the solution.
Absolutely.
I don't know where everything I was going with that, but I felt like maybe it needed to be said.
but that's really good. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but you shared that on LinkedIn recently, right? You shared something about owning your mistakes with your customer.
Yes. Yeah, I had a guy named Pierce from All Green Lights. He's out of I think Pennsylvania, And that dude is a boss, bro. He puts like data cabling in, so like where your network rack is and your switches and your routers and all that other stuff. And he puts in the cleanest installs I've ever seen. The cables are colored to if it's the printers or if it's video or if it's the, you know, the phones. And he does excellent work. And yeah, he talks about that. Admit it, own it, fix it.
Dude,
That's the key.
That's the thing that I appreciate about you. One of the many things, right, that I see you as a thought leader in your space. And when you talk about curiosity, and because I imagine too, you know, this is what happens when you start podcasting, just so everybody knows. When you start having these conversations with people, not only do you accelerate your own development, your own communication skills, you also face your demons. Like for me, it's my ums, my uhs, and my, you know, my stutters and all that stuff that I have now made peace with, right? But I couldn't have done that if I did not have the fire that is podcasting. But what you do is you start to think in terms of, I wonder if I should share this with like the people that are in my space. These people that have, you know, if they're subscribers or whatever it is, they're giving you their attention online. Your algorithm of your content. I saw your post about LinkedIn too in the algorithm, and brother, I feel you on it. Like just stuff disappearing and like, you know, things underperforming content and like without knowing why. There's all kinds of things. But when you start to do this and you make it about, you know, this is just part of our life, right? It really does inspire, you know, other people learning and figuring it out, so that even when you're typing, you know, Tyrannosaurus Rex style on a mobile post, people are learning and engaging because like your podcast, it's you, right? And it's your personal brand. And I think that's something too that translates outside of even being a podcast. Like even if you're in a full-time role or, you know, you don't have a podcast or whatever, you're a creative person and you do have a brand. Like that's the thing I think that everybody needs to understand is there's no such thing as an uncreative person. I feel like sometimes people are in the wrong role or in the wrong field. And like, even, you know, this might resonate with you, but like, I also understand that I probably won't be 90 years old doing Kansas City Business Cast. Like this is part of my evolution and my journey now.
Yeah.
And if anything has served me correctly throughout my life, I mean, look, I'm a criminal justice major, right? I didn't get into law enforcement, anything, but like I am always evolving and iterating and adapting, adopting, and abandoning, you know, things that I could do. But the podcast, man, it's like, I feel like it's just one of the great purifiers of our day. Also, too, if no one's told you lately, you're what? You're almost at 70 episodes or you've passed 70 episodes?
I think I wrote, so for news and highlights, which is that 30-minute segment.
You got
I wrote the 7th episode yesterday.
Gosh, dude.
But I have incredible. Like maybe 12 or 15 interviews over the last year.
Right.
So.
Right. And I did something similar. I had 5 minutes to learn. I had these little leadership segments and stuff. So if we counted those, right, you know, anyway, the statistic is most podcasts don't make it past an average, I think, of 12 or 15 episodes. Okay. And so again, yeah, Papa Hormozy. Do you follow Alex Hormozy at all?
I don't. I'll have to.
He's really good in the entrepreneurial space, really good influencer. I think he speaks really plainly. Great guy, but he actually put that statistic out there, and I was like, when I was at like 18 episodes, I was like, you know, like maybe,
I made it.
You know, I got some discipline. I'm doing the boring things, you know, the mundane stuff that it takes to get this stuff out here, you know. And there's also there's a crowd of people that laugh when they hear podcasters and creatives complain, because they're like, oh well, must be nice, right? But it's like. It's a whole
job, man.
What's that?
It's a whole job.
It is.
It's a lot of work.
Maybe plus, because it's like your heart and soul, and you're kind of putting it out there for people to either love or hate. And sometimes, you know, I don't know. Let me ask you about that. How supportive have people been in your life with, you know, being a public figure? Sorry, I don't know if you consider yourself a public figure or not, but I do.
Well, thank you.
You're not running for office or anything that I know of right now, but at the same time, like Baer Halvorson is putting himself out there, right?
Yeah. No,
how supportive have people been?
Well, so not? Okay, in industry related, because my content is really specific. The industry itself has, over the last maybe 2 years, really started to grow with some sort of like security influencer, right? And so there's maybe like 6 or 7 guys, really pumping some stuff out. It's really supported. Yeah, I've felt a lot of support from the people within the industry. I try really hard to live my life with an open hand and not hold on to anything. If I'm wrong in it, it needs to go. And if it's a good thing and I close my hand around it, it'll become a bad thing, right? It'll spoil. And so it's like, I try to do that in the way that I talk and the way that I learn. So there's been things that I've said, I don't like this because I'm pretty opinionated, being that it's like my own brand and it's not associated with any manufacturer or any integrator or anything like that. It's like, there's a couple of things, like Hikvision is a video camera system that is out of China and the FCC banned it. And the Chinese company, Hikvision, is 40% owned by the PRC. And
People's Republic of China.
Yep. And
in
they
case
win.
The listening algorithm didn't pick that up. Blacklist this episode.
Yeah.
Which I'm totally fine with, by the way, Baer. But go ahead.
Okay,
yes,
okay,
they own
good,
40% of the company. Yes.
Yeah,
go on.
and so it means they win the state contracts. The problem is that they've won contracts in the upper Xinjiang province, in the Mongolian mountains, where they're using AI analytics to detail a Uyghur people who are Muslim based and don't appear to look like the Han Chinese. And they're using it to kind of segment them and like find where they're at so that they can control that religion and population. And look, that's just like one thing that I've spoken on and I've been out against. And the problem is that Hikvision here in America, before they were FCC banned, they were the go-to because they didn't have to make money in America because they were winning the Chinese contracts because they were 40% owned, right? So when they came to America and sold their product, it was like bottom dollar, bro. You could get like a hella nice video camera, surveillance system camera for like $150, which a nice video surveillance camera is maybe like $450. So integrators left and right were putting Hikvision in because they were winning the projects and they were making profit and margin on it. So when I started to speak against it, I did get pushback. Now I like to think that I live with that open hand and I hard about the things that I believe in. And so I come across as like, this is what I believe, these are the reasons, and they seem like solid, logical, sturdy reasons. And so I didn't get a ton of like hate. They weren't like, you're an asshole, or, like, you don't know what you're talking about or anything. I would got a lot of feedback of like, okay, then what should I use? Like, how am I going to win these projects? I'm trying to put food on my kid's table. Like, and I'm a one man in a van. What am I going to use? Like, it's what I have to do. It's not that bad. And those are hard conversations. And I tried to approach them with that grace factor. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, look,
dude,
I understand. But here are 3 other camera systems that you will have to take a little bit of a loss on your margin. You might be getting 35%. You're going to have to jump down to like 27, 26,
Absolutely.
But you're doing that because you're supporting something ethically. You care about the industry you're in. You care about your client. You care about what comes out of your hand. And at the end of the day, do you want to put something in that could be being weaponized against somebody? And then they'll run you with the red herring, right? They'll be like, well, you use an iPhone, right? That's mined out of cobalt.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, fine. That's fine. You can say that, but that's a completely different conversation. And I'm talking about your work and your career. Yes, I use an iPhone, and it is older, and it probably did get serviced and mined in not an ethical way. But that's something that, like, I don't have the capacity right now. So I'm giving you grace because you're trying to put food on your kid's table. Give me grace to know that I don't have the capacity to comb my entire life of technologies that might be ill-used elsewhere, to get that out of and still operate in life in a way to put food on my kid's table. It's a big process there. And so
absolutely, man.
I have gotten a lot of support over the years. There has not been a lot of hate by any means.
That's really cool. Well, I think especially people get it in the beginning because you are breaking the archetype of what everyone in your family and your circle of friends they signed up for. And you are now you're going for something else. Like it's kind of like losing a lot of weight. So like I know this, I was a fat guy for a long time. I'm technically a fat guy right now. So, and I do not skirt around, I don't skirt around the language because I've lived as one. I know what it's like to be treated differently. I know what it's like to not be able to tie my shoes and be out of breath. But when I started losing weight, people start saying, you're skinny, you look skinny. Like, are you okay? You know, they're doing it to Post Malone still, I think, right now. They're assuming he's doing drugs and all this stuff. But I think especially when you start off on something, things I heard when I started my podcast, Baer, I could never do that. Well, good thing you didn't start a freaking podcast. I mean, literally, right? You hear the objections come out, and the same thing goes when you call out stuff like, you know, for our listeners, if you do not know who the Uyghur people are, please look them up and find whatever you can about what's happening to them right now. Modern day concentration camps, okay? Like, I'm not going to beat around the bush, but like when you said that, it was like, man, that really resonates with me, right? But I feel like, you know, in the beginning stages of starting things, you will get, maybe it's not hate, but it's resistance. Like,
for sure.
And I haven't gotten to like the level that you're at right now, like with the reputation and all that stuff. And so I imagine that the bigger you get, then you'll start getting a little bit of haters because they'll say, well, he's wrong because this guy's right. And you know, these things or whatever. But when you decide to actually speak with your convictions, like people are not going to agree with it all the time. I love how you started to talk about, you know, technology. I've been meaning to ask you too. This is something that came out of my thoughts as I was preparing for this, but like, where are you at with some of the advances in security, like facial recognition, using AI, you know, cameras everywhere. Like there are cameras everywhere. And, you know, I saw you'd posted a very interesting article about Ring cameras. You know, we've all got them on the houses. Like we know our phones never shut off. You know, how do you, I know I'm unpacking a lot of stuff. There's a lot of cans of worms there, but like, where are you at in the security industry? And I don't want to make it sound like I'm setting you up for anything either, right? I just want to ask your perspective about that. You talked about unethical manufacture of things. What about unethical security practices or invasive? Like, what's too far? Maybe that's the way to frame it.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a layered question.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's also like, you know, that's part of that 5-hour podcast we're going to talk about. So it's hard because, so I think that what I feel is that physical security professionals should be creating content so that people who aren't in the physical security space can digest it and get, you know, kind of set to true, like recompassed, like pushed in the right direction. Ring now lets you opt out of a couple of analytics and opt out a couple of data mining things. And so I don't mind Ring because you can turn that off in the settings. I also push a lot of Arlo cameras and Arlo doorbells, and that's only because in 2022 they came out at a cybersecurity conference and they said, we do not collect data and we do not work with law enforcement. And so I was like, okay, maybe they do. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, like maybe they do. But they're the only motherfuckers standing on stage saying we don't, right? So I tend to push Arlo when it comes to like home security from that perspective. It is hard because I have a huge passion for the right to privacy. I use operational security often in my life. It's guarded. When people start to dig in, they're like, well, maybe I really don't know that much about him anyway. You know, I think he's got kids, and I think that I think he lives in Kansas City. I think he was in Montana. It's hard. I make it intentionally hard to just trace, you know, because I don't want people knowing about my life. That's my right to privacy. You have your right to privacy, and we should be fighting for that. And we have a couple of, you know, mega companies that data mine, and they make a lot of money off that. And so when it comes to the ethical side of it, I'm definitely like on the picket line with signs like, you know, stay away from my privacy, don't data mine me. Like that's my information that you're making money off of. I didn't consent to that, and that's not an ethical human thing. When it comes to the devices and the technology, it takes a little bit of research, and I think that you should do that. I know, and man, it's hard because you get common thought processes. You know, it's kind of like hive mind that people go, well, I ain't got anything to hide. And it's like, okay, that's super common for people to say. And it's like, okay, maybe you don't, but the problem is that there's two problems. First of all, you don't realize how deep it is. You do have stuff that you're ashamed of and that they can pull from, you know?
Yep.
When you're like, I don't care if they know that I bought Bud Light at the gas station. And it's like, okay, you don't. But then you took that Bud Light. You had a very vulnerable moment with a buddy on the porch about your genital warts. And now your phone knows that, and you're going to get ads for it.
And your watch pinged cell towers and showed that you were driving. Yes. I mean,
the whole nine. So yeah, there is data that you don't want out there because we deserve a right to privacy. I think it's innate. I think that it's like the fact that you have a conscience and you can talk to yourself without other people knowing shows that the divine creation of us gave us the right to privacy. And so we should instill that in our life with our communities. There should be that barrier that is appropriate, and we should fight for that. And so it's interesting because I am out there in the tech world. I'm in security. I'm like, yeah, do this, do that. I love AI. I love the analytics. I love all this stuff. It's really helping in some situations. And then I'm also like on the picket, like, no more, leave me alone.
I've seen a movie about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen, one of my favorite. Oh, go ahead.
No, you keep going. I love movies.
I was going to say one of my favorite memes that I saw the other day was from White Belt Tears, this jiu-jitsu account I follow. It was a robot from iRobot with Will Smith, and it said, my personal Tesla robot looking at me when I tell it to go kill the heavyweight who smother tapped me at practice last week. You know what I mean? It's just so funny. Like when I saw the video of the Tesla robot serving people drinks, I was like, I've been the freak for 20 years saying that Terminator is probably the most realistic of all the dystopian sci-fi nightmares that could come. And movies inspire technology, like technology inspires the movie. Like it's this cyclical thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if people, like what you just said, it was just so sane, right? It's like everybody has something that they are not proud of. And we've got these devices everywhere. And personally, man, like I am all about security. Obviously, I have said that. And, that's why I've got cameras on the front of my house. Mindfully don't have them in the back because if, I'm having a fireside with my buddies, I want them to know, like, hey, like what we talk about at the fire stays at the fire, and even in the days when I was doing something on my front driveway, like I used the Ring settings, like it wasn't just on snooze, but it was like that camera was off, right? And I'm sure somebody out there would probably say, well, the battery was still on and blah, blah, blah. But, I'm just a firm believer as well, like in people have to have room to make a thought crime out loud.
Yeah, totally. That's a human thing. Yeah.
It's part of development. Like I'm thinking about like who I was when I was a teenager, and like, you ever hear that saying, like who I am hates who I've been? Like I'm so glad that I didn't stay, who I was. And like everybody's on a developmental trajectory anyway, man. Thanks for walking down that rabbit hole with me, man. I appreciate that. And
no, not a problem.
No matter what you said. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I'll tell you one last thing. Like just when it comes to that tech, like, and the emerging trends in physical and cybersecurity, it's like anything else. There's like, it's being used in good ways and it's being used in bad ways. And there are some companies that, for instance, there's a company out of France called Veritas, and they're using facial recognition. And the way that they do facial recognition is they like, dot your face, right? Like facial recognition does. And then they turn that into what's called a hash, which is just a series of numbers. And then that series of numbers is associated with what would be considered your account or your ID, right? And then they delete that photo, and that photo is not living on any servers. And so if someone hacked into Veritas's servers and stole all the information, it wouldn't make any sense. It's just like strings of numbers that only Veritas understands whose accounts those are associated with. But they're not getting pictures of me. They wouldn't even know that it was associated with my face, So
right.
There are ways to do it that are ethical, and there are ways to do it that can help the convenience, right? So like you can go to a Chiefs game and just walk in because it knows your face, and you signed up on your phone and they don't have a picture of you, they just associated it with the hash, and you can just walk in. You don't have to stand in line or present your ticket or anything like that, and it's all secure. And that makes it more convenient for our life, and it's also not stealing our data, and there is a happy medium between that. I mean, like, at the end of the day, I am a naturalist. I think that, like, we got too far away from nature, and so our technology should intertwine us within that, but that's a whole nother podcast, you know what I'm saying?
Well, my dude, like, I mean, this is a long form podcast, and we set up a couple hours to do this, and I've been meaning to talk to you about your, nature and that approach, because that's something that really resonates with me and how I want to raise my kids, and a lot of stuff, especially now, like, it's funny, like, I was looking into the research of grounding and why, putting your bare feet on grass is good for you and your soul, literally, and all this. And it's very interesting now that, we're getting all this research on, our connection with nature. And, believers, Christians out there, even some of the other religions are like, hey, we were made from mud, and to the mud will return, right? So there's almost like there's this natural piece there of, like, I was made out of this, and that's how, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Like, going outside of the technology thing, I so appreciate that you're a technology nerd, but you're also like, nah, I'm a nerd for nature too.
Yeah. No.
So
I
yeah,
am,
like,
I am.
like, tell us about that, man. Like, how does that keep you connected? How do you what are your hobbies out in nature? And yeah, I mean, what do you do to be refreshed, I guess, and come back to your work?
Yeah, my family unit, we like to spend a lot of time outside. We like to hike, be in the woods. That's something that's really entertaining to us. I feel that, my kids and my family unit were really detailed when it comes to the woods. So we'll just, like, literally go out on a trail, get in the woods, and then just start looking at shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, what's under this rock? Look at this bug. Oh my God, there's an owl that no one would have saw, And so it's like just taking that in. And I really do feel from, being in technology and also feeling very refreshed in nature has led to a lot of my interests in, my self-education coming into this kind of merging of it, that, like, at the end of the day, we are a biological form of technology. We're electrical, so when
Take me to church, bro.
Yeah. So when you put your feet on the ground, this, you're setting yourself on in huge conductor that's floating through space. And so, like, it can recenter you, and that frequency can pull you back into feeling feelings. And that's the thing that for a long time we haven't really understood, and it's not been preached through the Industrial Revolution. We were, like, hyper focused on the machinery and the steel and the tech to come from it, and Moore's law with, like, computer set chips and all this other stuff. And it's not realizing that all that stuff was already in existence. We just put it into another form. And so that's already all there. And so I try hard to make sure that I keep myself in some sort of way tied to nature, whether that's going out on hikes. We got a couple friends with land that we spend time on. Sometimes in the day when I'm working from home, I'll just, like, kick my longboard down the trail and just, like, sit, because you're going to see a little bit of weird side of me. So this is where, like, I'm like, okay, so these bugs are all out there and they're beating their wings, right? And you hear the zzz, and the trees are wrestling. That's all creating this sound that, like, falls in line to these sound waves that will pull my brain and my electricity in my body back to hormones that make me feel, right? It's all connected. So if you sit there for just 20 minutes and just listen to the buzz around you, it can, like, really center you. And I've gotten my best ideas out of that. I'll do that and I'll come back, and it won't usually be associated with work. Don't tell anybody that. But it'll be like, oh, shit, man, I need to talk about this, or I should create this, or this is something I want to do in the future, Like, so it can really, dude. And that creativity, man, that positivity will help you dream, and it just helps you be better. And I feel like a lot of the people, we get pent up, we get in the rhythm, we don't touch grass, we get, really solid on it, and then we feel like everything's falling apart in our life. And it's like, well, it is, because you just need a second to relax. You need to wind down. Absolutely. And not wind down with blue light from, Hulu.
Yeah, man. My gosh, Bear, man, it has been
You
so
pulled a
good.
card. I just showed a card. You were like, tell me this. Okay, that is something.
Dude, I'm with you, dude. I'm
No,
with
I
you.
know. I
Like
know. Yeah, yeah.
maybe most, if not all of the ills in our world today is because we've lost connection.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that's where I go very much kumbaya avatar with it all.
Yeah, yeah. Plugging in. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like as far as like what they were doing to the planet, I forgot what it was, but I mean they're literally raping the planet. Back to the ills of not being connected to nature, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love how you're like, I get my longboard, I take it down the trail, I listen to the buzzing, the flapping of the wings. The fact too that if you don't make a practice of that, you can't hear that the first 2 or 3 times you do it. So like
Yeah. It
if
feels
there's some,
weird.
it does, right? And I would say too, this is like the value of quiet time as well. Like people who have quiet time that start to try and make that a practice, whether it's like meditation or a Bible study or whatever they're trying to do in the morning. So often, and present company included, like when I started doing gratitude journaling, I had Cam F. Awesome on my show, and I bought a couple of gratitude journals off him, and I was like, this feels really weird because it's not
Yeah.
my normal. It's not
Yeah.
average. And so the first few times, your head is full of the noise. It's like you take the noise from your desk with you. But if you're getting out and you're doing that on a regular basis, then you start, you hear the buzz, you hear the flapping of the wings, and you start to notice color come back. But man, it's been so good speaking with you. Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel like is paramount to kind of let our listeners know, or like a note that you want to end on with this show?
I mean, I feel like there's a bunch of things that I want to talk to you more about, but I don't think that
Sure.
like we missed anything that I wanted to highlight. I will say that I'm in Kansas City. Like I said, I've got that open hand. I want to help. So if you have physical security questions or desires, or like what should I do here, and you own your own business, or you have a home, or whatever it be, like I work in that. I can resource that. I know people who work in it if I can't be there. Everything from keying the locks to putting cameras on that house, or putting access control on the business, it can be sourced or at least consulted. So I view myself as kind of a lifelong consultant. You know what I'm saying? Like I'll give where I can give. And so, yeah, if there's anything, and if you're in physical security and you're looking for education, like I said, blackpicketfenceonline.com. I've got one course that I came out with this year that goes over circuitry in access control and how to understand that. And it's like, 3+ hours, and it comes with some printable PDFs. Like, I'm just trying to make sure that whatever I'm putting out there, someone leaves with like a nugget. I call them on my podcast, I call them a peach, because I feel like when I have these interviews, it's like walking through an orchard and there's like a couple ripe peaches in there, and they're specifically for you. So just listen in, look for the right peaches, and get your peaches. That's what I
Love
say.
that, man. Man, so good talking with you, man.
You too, brother.
Buddy,
You too.
y'all heard it from Bear himself. We talked about security, we talked about technology, we talked about all kinds of good things in this conversation. We'll have to do it again, sir, maybe in a
Yes,
future
yes.
season. But man, it's been so good speaking with you. All right, everybody, you know the drill, right? I asked this. Some of you, this is the 80th time that you've heard it. Some of you, this is your first time tuning in. So I'll ask, I so appreciate your engagement with the podcast. Like if you're following us on Instagram or you just found us, like likes and shares are great. But for me, and then also my friend Bear here with his podcast, what matters so much to us is if you can subscribe, okay? Subscribing helps us build our following. When you build your following on these platforms, it opens up opportunities for ads, sponsors, monetization. There's all types of things. If you enjoy what we're doing, the best thing you can do for us is just take a couple seconds, just a few more clicks to write us a review on Apple, give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, share something if it resonates with you and you see another business owner or somebody who's looking to harden their business like we've been talking about. Please share this content, and thank you for even if tuning in. If you just like what you're hearing, we appreciate it, and we'll see you next time here on season 3.